Hello, Susan.
Hello, good
Uh,
to see you.
Wonderful to be here. Um, I'm Donna Chacko, and we're back with Pop Up Conversations, which is a part of my Serenity and Health ministry. And it's been one of the funnest things that I do is periodically interview special people that I know or have met whose lives are involved with the intersection of their faith and their work, either personally or professionally or some way. And this day is really special because my guest is Susan, and not only does she meet those requirements, but she's also a very, very good friend. And I know Susan very well because we have been meeting very briefly weekly for more than 10 years as prayer partners and sharers of our journeys. And it's quite an honor and a blessing for both of us, I think. But she's here today in her capacity as a coach. And, I wanted to have her on because when I started out in medicine, the only coaches were baseball coaches and sports coaches, and now it's very common to have coaches of all kinds of varieties. So I wanted to I wanted to learn, I want all of us to learn how this fits into the scheme of things. So with that, Susan, welcome.
Thank you.
Um, I met Susan when she was at the Columbia Road Health Services part of Unity Medical Clinic in Washington. And she has a history, her professional life originally was accounting and finance and stuff. And so she's kind of had her own journey, and I'm going to have her share with us how she got from that to where she's at now with her own coaching operation and business.
Thank you. Yes, I've actually had a lot of careers, and my degree is in civil engineering. So, like most kids growing up in the 60s, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I love math and science. So I thought engineering was a great fit. I didn't have the physical stamina or fitness to be an astronaut, so I went with engineering. I loved studying engineering. Got out of college and didn't really care for the work because it was very money focused. And I didn't care for that. So I tried a bunch of other things. And I also spent a number of years full time at home with my kids and using that time to learn and explore and figure out what do I really want to do when I grow up. And from there, I ended up with a series of local part time jobs that were mom friendly, administrative stuff. And then it led me into accounting, and accounting is potentially a very mom-friendly job. So I used that time to be with my kids and earn some money and pick up skills. So I picked up the financial skills that led me eventually to Columbia Road as chief financial officer, which is very funny because I had never planned or intended to be in that role. But I loved it. I loved the mission where we took care of vulnerable people.
Yes.
You and all the clinical people in that role, and
And
being
you
in the executive role.
broadened the role so much in your capacity. I mean, both as chief financial officer and then in your next step, which you'll tell us. I mean, you made that job a whole lot more than what it was on paper. That's for sure.
I did, and that was really the calling that was emerging over the years. I found from the very beginning of my career that what I really loved, what brought me the most joy, was to get people together and help them work better as a team. And there's a particular magic that happens when people come together and they are helped to get engaged with each other as human beings and cross fertilize and share their energies and their gifts. It's really magical. And I found I had a gift for that, even in the engineering job right out of college.
Yes.
So I was always interested in that broader picture of how do we get people to work better together. And I also found I was good at helping people individually, meeting them where they are
Yeah.
and figuring out what the block is. I did some math tutoring as one of those part-time jobs, and it's always meeting people where they are,
Yeah.
finding out what the blockage is, and then helping them find the path. So I was their chief financial officer at Columbia Road Health Services, and then, as you know, we merged with a larger organization. They didn't need me in finance, so I moved into an operations role,
The
where I
boss.
was in charge of keeping the whole thing running. And that was a blessing and a real calling. And it was also very difficult, very stressful. And the only thing that really made it possible was the good people we had. And so I set about from the beginning, and for the 10 years that I continued to do that job, I set about to help the people help each other better.
Right. Well, I can vouch you did a good job. So just to clarify then, Susan, you became the director of the clinic. I think that was your
Yes,
title, right?
yes.
And so every problem, of which there were zillions, involved us running to Susan's door, knock on the door about the computer being down or this or that, or this employee didn't come, or uh, lots of issues. And of course, healthcare is an ever changing business operation. And it certainly changed a lot during those years. So there were stresses and interpersonal stuff in the clinic. And I mean, it wasn't, we all felt the stress. And that's where I first saw your talents as working with people in groups with your various retreats that you developed and offered. And, those were group retreats, but maybe before we start talking about individual coaching, you could just mention how that came about and what that was kind of cool. And if maybe people
Yeah.
don't know what that's about, a work retreat for interpersonal relationships. We were lucky to have it at the clinic.
Yeah, yeah, I so love doing that, and that really is what led me into where I am now. I was suddenly responsible for all of the operations of this clinic with a lot of good people doing good work, but under very difficult circumstances. I used to say that the interruptions of my interruptions have interruptions
Yeah.
because there was constantly a crisis every minute that I had to deal with, and I also had to meet some deadlines and get some of my own work done. And so the only way to do it was to mobilize everybody else's gifts and to help them work together. And I knew there was more talent to be tapped there that initially was spent in conflict and partitioning and silos, and I knew it didn't need to be that way. And so I put my head together with our leadership team of wonderful people and with our in-house therapist who knew something about groups. And we started concocting this plan to have our first retreat. And it went so well, and I loved it so much that I started doing it every year. I would have done more, but we couldn't get permission to close down and have all the staff there more than half a day once a year, even though it was a tremendously productive thing to do. Our site had the lowest turnover, the longest tenure, and some of the best clinical and administrative and financial outcomes of any site in the organization. And I attribute that to the wonderful teamwork that we had.
Yes. Yes. And to our leader who made that happen. Because it really is difficult to work together and put your best out when you're, tired, exhausted, irritated, think the other person isn't doing their share, blah, 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 all the stuff that goes on. Um, Maybe you could just give one or two very brief examples of what happened at those retreats in case the listeners don't have such a thing available and are interested.
Yeah, we played a lot. Um, Getting people together to laugh and be silly and just be human is amazingly powerful. It creates connections. It reduces stress. It lets people start seeing each other as human beings instead of as obstacles. It really released a lot of the tension and the siloing, and it helped people communicate better so they could pick up the phone and say, hey, can you help me with this? And the other person, instead of saying, oh, I'm busy with my own stuff, they'd say, sure, I'll do this. And everything got easier because we had taken some time to play together.
Right. So those balloon games were pretty hilarious. But there was also some good sharing of feelings that were kind of bottled up sometimes for those who could participate in that. It was great.
Yeah, once we had done some playing and loosened people up, it was possible to have conversations that we couldn't have otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great. Well, moving from that, now you are no longer working at the clinic. You have your own business. And I loved what you wrote when you said you want to help your clients find depth and purpose and joy in their life. And I know you don't have your organization is not a Christian organization, but because of our friendship, I know that's your faith, and I know that kind of guides your thinking about all of these things. But depth and purpose and joy, that's some heavy stuff. So tell us how that works. How you got now to be able to meet with people, and like you just mentioned, your training, because I know you had considerable training, and then how it works with the client, and walk us through it.
Yeah. So once I realized how much I loved working with groups and individuals, because I was also helping individual employees cope with stuff, I decided to get some training, and I found a coaching school that is really deep. Coaching is a broad topic, and some of it is more skills oriented, horizontal, developing certain skills and moving towards certain goals. That's not what we do. It's not what I do, and it's not what the New Ventures West Coaching School teaches. We teach vertical development, which goes into a person's growth. And the growth invariably involves spiritual development. It doesn't always involve religion. I've worked with clients of all religions and no religion. But there's always a soul. We all have our soul. And one of our instructors said, fundamentally, everybody wants their soul back. And that's what we're aiming to help them do. And when people find their soul and get their soul back, then they're able to open their gifts to the world. And the joy of that is amazing. We as human beings, we get our joy from offering our gifts to the world.
That's powerful. Yeah, joy. We could all use a little more joy these days, I guess. So this sounds like a good thing. This sounds like a really good thing. So, I know from our relationship that you had to study and participate and work really, really hard to get your certification. It took a couple years, as I recall, right, of effort. And now you meet with anybody that signs up for your services, individuals or groups. So I'd like to talk about the individuals, because it kind of perplexes me how, as a physician, we had limited time. So I didn't have this experience all at once of sitting with someone and having an hour or however long you take to get to know them. It sounds like it would be really wonderful. But even with all that time, not easy, because people's lives are so complicated. So how do you even start? Somebody contacts you because something is not quite right. And how do you start?
Yes. So we start by having a phone call. There's no charge for the phone call, and we just walk through what are you looking for and what I offer and how it works and how much it costs. And if they want to go ahead with it, we schedule an intake meeting, which is between 60 and 90 minutes. So it's a good chunk of time. And I really feel for clinical people, because seeing somebody in 10 minutes is just painful. It is truly wrong. It's not a good way to be a healer. So our system is broken. So I do indeed feel blessed to be able to say I'm taking 90 minutes, and that's what it takes. Yeah. But as you say, even with all of that, a person's life is enormously complex. So we have a systematic methodology where I ask a lot of questions. I warn the client ahead of time, I'm going to ask a lot of nosy questions. You don't have to answer them all. You share what you're comfortable sharing. But I'm trying to build a full picture. And in this methodology where I explore all parts of your life, I will ask about your health, your relationships, your life history, your work, your beliefs, your relationship with nature, your relationship with money. All of those things matter, and they fit into a model, which I then, after the intake session, I comb through that and try to form a picture. And even with all of this methodology, we are constantly reminded in coach training to treat the person as a sacred mystery, because every person is, in fact, a sacred mystery. There's no way for me to put you into a model and say, this is who you are. This is what you're doing.
Right. Well, don't you think we're sacred mystery even to ourselves a great deal of the time?
Yes,
speaking for myself, it feels like that. Like there's oh my goodness.
We are, and we never figure it out. There's no such thing as figuring it all out.
Do you think that the clients you've seen have a good understanding of what their issue or problem is?
That's always a fascinating question. It's one of the things I love about coaching. People will come in with what we call a presenting issue. Here's what I want to work on. And it's usually career related. I want to change jobs, or I want to get a better handle on the job I have, or I want to figure out what to do in my retirement. And I explain that everything's connected to everything, and the issue never exists in isolation. And so when we sit down and get the full picture, I will come back at the next session and say, here's what I'm seeing. And in this full picture that I'm seeing, there is a deeper issue. Invariably, there is a growth area that needs to be tended to. And when the person tends with guidance, tends to their vertical development, developing more capacity and more maturity, the presenting issue then becomes clearer. It becomes easier to see how to move ahead on the presenting issue while also becoming a deeper and broader person.
Okay, now I have a question. Can you give an example and do it in a way to preserve total privacy of a client? You're modified in any way, just to give us an example. Is that possible?
Yes, I have several in my head. So here's one from very early in my coach training. I had a young man who was working for a large corporation, and he was very frustrated because he wasn't advancing. He kept asking for a promotion and kept being told that he wasn't ready. And so I sat and worked with him. And in the picture of his whole life that emerged, I saw that he was a really pushing person, worked hard, always very, very determined, which are good traits. Those are good things to have in your life, to be determined and work hard. But he was so focused on pushing that he wasn't open to feedback. And so before we could solve his career issue, we had to talk about, how do you approach life in the big picture, with some degree of curiosity, openness, flexibility, learning that you don't always get to the right place just by pushing. And the story I used for him, we do this a lot using images in this coaching school. We will create an image of how the person is currently living. I said, you're living like you're a running back in a never-ending football game. Push.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? And he said, yeah, that does sound like what I'm doing. And I said, and I'd like you to consider a new narrative as a possibility to live into. What if you were a pilgrim instead, on foot, exploring something like the Camino de Santiago, to explore the world and be open to what you find? And that idea opened up a whole new, his whole body opened up and his mind opened up. And feedback I got later after the engagement was over, that he was much more flexible and much better at listening to feedback.
Yeah.
And the situation improved.
Yes. I can imagine that a coaching client of yours should probably come back like every 5 years, even if they get it a bit the first time. They should come back, because we always backslide. Well, not always. No, that's not true. But anyway, it's a process, as you say. That's helpful. That's helpful to have an example. Do you want to share one more example?
I have some examples that are related to particular skills that people need to acquire.
Okay.
If this is a good time for that.
Yeah, do that. That'd be good.
So one of the issues that often comes up is boundaries and communication. And so people will come in with a presenting issue around frustration, that these people around me aren't helping me. They're not doing what I want. They're not listening to me. And so there's this deepening process in adult development around learning what's mine, what's not mine, what can I legitimately ask for or say no to, and how to say no to that without feeling like the sky is going to fall. And it's amazing how many people don't really know. We've been trained out of this. We've been trained to either be super nice and agree to everything, thinking we have to please everybody, or to be bullies and just steamroll everybody. People fall into one of those camps the way we raise children. And it's very unfortunate, because when we learn what's mine to say yes to or no to, and what is not mine, so I need to let go of trying to control that, things become so much clearer, and we get our agency back, and we get our energy and flow back. But it's
Yes.
scary to learn to
No.
say
Yes.
yes or no.
Oh, yes. As you know, I've dealt with all that kind of stuff myself. I think women in general have a more of a problem knowing and standing up for what our inner truth is. I don't think that's a stereotype. I think that's true. I think that's part of what happens to women in relationships, in families, in the workplace. But anyway, that's okay. We can still learn and grow and maintain our womanhood in the process. Um, is there one kind of common thread that you often see? Maybe it's the one you just mentioned, in terms of communication and boundaries. I suspect that might be what it is, that's repeated a lot.
Yeah, that's one of the two. So that's the more surface level one. A deeper issue is that in everybody wants their soul back. Most people have at some level lost touch with their bodies and their emotions. And so a lot of what I'm doing is somatic work, teaching people ways of getting back in touch with their bodies. And in getting in touch with the bodies, we get in touch with our emotions and learn to allow them, to let them flow, to own them,
So what does
and
that
to
mean?
really feel them.
For somebody not into this language, like, what? Get in touch with my body. And I say this because I still so vividly remember when I went to a retreat quite some time ago, and they asked the participants, it was a spiritual retreat, they asked us all to identify the place in our body, the physical place, the thing, the symptom that we felt when we were stressed. And I was like, that was like so foreign to me. And I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Yes, it
Part of,
is.
anyway.
Yeah. So if I may share something personal about our work together,
Yes.
we actually experienced this together in the work shortly after I started to learn about somatic experiences of emotions. There was a day when things were really stressful in the clinic, and you came to my office, and you were very, very upset about something that the headquarters had done, which was indeed a stressful thing, but it wasn't something that I could fix. And so, since I knew you and trusted you, I decided to experiment with this. I experimented on you. I said, yeah, that's really hard. Can you take a minute and tell me where you feel that in your body? And you didn't get mad at me because you trusted me, but you sat and you said, it's in my stomach. My stomach is clenched. And you were able to focus on the physical sensation. And that led to a certain amount of sadness that came up. And there was a release in your body that I saw. And I always see this with coaching clients who identify the physical and the emotional experience and get in touch with it. There's a release. We're not trying to fight the whole world anymore. We're just sitting in our own reality.
Right. Well, I think it's really cool because now I understand more that if you're all balled up in stress and irritation and anger and resentment, and you may not be able to reach that, but you might be able to identify the clenched jaw or the tight stomach. And so it can be like a warning. If you're mindful and try and think about it, it can be a warning sign that can remind you, oh, it's happening. It's time to take a breath, step back, relax, think about what's going on. Yeah. That's
And
really
how
funny.
we,
I don't remember that episode in your office, but I do know I came to your office many times knocking on the door. Oh my
I hope
gosh.
you found it helpful most of the
Yes, I
time.
do. I
You
did.
know, Viktor Frankl, spoke about his experience in concentration camp in World War II, and he said something along the lines of, "We can't control what happens in the world, but we can control how we respond."
Yeah.
That's universally true. And so getting back in touch with our bodies and our emotions is part of the process of discerning how we respond rather than just reacting to it. It's all awful. Nothing is right. I can't cope with the world. Okay, what am I feeling and how am I going to respond?
Right. Yes. I had a thought this morning. I think I was reading the newspaper about or something about that business of someone who wrote a tweet and then someone else spread the tweet. And then the first someone who sent the tweet lost the job because of the publicity. And it probably wasn't a very wise tweet anyway. But it just struck me like, we don't really have to promulgate or say out loud or tweet or post our every little thought. I don't think it's very helpful. So to the world and even to us. So, I mean, I was just thinking of some things you're saying. It's more if we could learn and reflect on that. I don't know. I was just thinking about all of what we put out there of our thoughts that's not helpful to others or to ourselves, to our growth. Anyway, that's sort of a sideline. Um, I'm just so intrigued with coaching. Can you define for us, just because we still have a few minutes, the different types of coaching? I mean, are there clear categories or is it, I think you've described coaching as the wild, wild west, that it's not really too defined and classified yet, right?
It's very much an emerging field. And I still get occasional contacts on LinkedIn from people who want me to apply for a volleyball coach job.
Yeah.
So yeah, that concept is still out there. But the International Coaching Federation is large and it's working worldwide to define coaching and establish professional standards. So their certification, which I also have, is the gold standard around the world for now. And that covers leadership coaching, coaching for people in business to be more effective in their work, and coaching for people in their personal lives to figure out how to live their lives more effectively. A huge number of corporations use coaching and nonprofits and government agencies as well. The school that I attended even offers in-house cohorts for US government agencies. They have trained people in some departments of the US government to be internal coaches, which is really cool. It's a good sign because people with this training are very effective leaders.
Oh, right. I can imagine. I can imagine. I think I think it's really, really exciting, and it fills such a big need because life is complicated, and in terms of professional services, it fills in gaps. Not everybody can go or needs a psychiatrist or a therapist. I think what you do overlaps a fair amount with what a therapist offer, although not exactly the same. Do you have any comment about that
Yeah.
relationship between the two?
Yes, and in fact, I read therapist magazines and go to therapist conferences just precisely so that I'll know how that field is evolving and what they offer, so that I can refer clients with confidence when I need to pass them on to somebody with more expertise in a certain area. But there's a lot that I can do if somebody is not too deep in trauma or mental illness. I can do some of the things that a therapist would do: the deep listening,
Right.
the mirroring, the acknowledging, meeting where they are. I want to add also on the previous question about coaching, what coaching is and how it's evolving. There's another important organization which is called the Institute of Coaching. They're based at Harvard Medical School, and they're committed to advancing research on coaching. And so they have a lot of really high quality research going on about the impacts of coaching in organizations, communities, and the world. And they're doing really cool work on diversity and justice work.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Um, Another thing Susan offers to anyone, clients and friends, is it seems like a never ending list of really good references and contacts and websites and stuff. And this is her business card. and her website, she's going to tell us about that in a minute. But on there, she has, did that show? On there, she has a list of resources and books and stuff, because, I mean, to work on yourself, you can't rely totally on a coach or a doctor. I mean, it's your self study. You got to put work into it. And I'm a firm believer that for some people, at the right time, the right book can just be absolutely transformative. And so I think that's another gift that you give to folks, Susan. I've always appreciated all those ideas and recommendations. So, well, do you have any, tidbits for folks from what you've learned on maybe how to avoid needing a coach from what you've seen, or how to best utilize one if they choose to come see you?
Human beings need human beings. So we always benefit from having a group of people that we can just be ourselves with and run our thoughts by and get, bounce things off of people. So the most important thing anyone can do is to have a community of trusted people, like a women's circle, or a family that you really trust. Not people that we have to put on a persona with, but people that we can be completely ourselves with. If you don't have one, building a community like that is really foundational.
Yeah.
And then with respect to needing coaching, I think we all always need coaching. And so I do continuing education, partly because it's required for my certification, but also because I love it, because there are a lot of layers to this onion. We're really never done developing. And I just love having another pair of eyes on my situation, looking and saying, okay, here's what's next. Here's something to look at. And that gives me another layer of deepening, broadening, solidifying how I live in an authentic and really alive way.
Yeah, that's wise. That's wonderful. That's great. Well, I from a personal standpoint, I can positively say to anybody who's listening, you're not going to go wrong if you wish to contact Susan and consider hiring her as a coach. I wanted her to come on so we could all learn, but also it's fun to tell about someone who has something really good to offer. And Susan, I think you said, well, and you can get all the information at her website. Riggs Integral Coaching is the name of her business. So the website is riggsintegralcoaching.org. And I'm going to put on the show notes her email, her phone number, and all of this. And Susan, I think you said that for people who call you, tell me about how you're going to make it a little easier for them if they wish to consider having your services.
Yeah. So there's a standard engagement of 6 months, or 3 months for a short one, or 12 months for a long one. But if somebody's not sure whether they're ready to jump into that water, I offer a one-time pay what you wish session. So we would talk for 60 to 90 minutes, and people can pay me literally what they wish, because I want people to experience it and have a chance to find out what coaching is like and have a chance to be heard.
That's a fabulous offer, everybody out there. Really, and I encourage you to take advantage of it. Really, I think it would be really helpful. Well, this has been really, really fun, Susan. I'm so glad we were able to work this out. And Riggs, RIGGS Integral Coaching is the name again. And if you look at the show notes that come with this pop-up conversation, you'll get all that information. And if you go to her website, like I said, she's got a marvelous list of resources that would be helpful. So that's about it. Anything I forgot to ask that's important, Susan?
Let me just offer that one of the most important tools that we use in this coaching school is the Enneagram. So if anybody has not run into the Enneagram, I encourage you to start researching it. There are books on my website. There are lots and lots of books and resources out there, some of them better than others. So it's a little complicated to explore the field, but it's a personality and growth tool that is really deep and rich.
Yes, that word, can you spell it? Because I think,
Enneagram, yeah, Enneagram.
okay, Enneagram. Um, I agree with that. And and like Susan said, you could get information on her website about it, or you could Google it, whatever. All right. So I think this brings us to the end of our time. Thank you so much, Susan. I knew I would enjoy it, and I did enjoy it, and I think the folks listening will receive benefit as well. So God bless. Have a great day.
Thank you
We'll
so
see you
much.
later. Take care.
All right, take care.